Welcome back. I'm Dan Baldwin, and this is the Newsmaker segment of Elsinore.News. This week, our Newsmaker segment is brought to us by the Find Your Voice Center. We just happen to be in the beautiful Find Your Voice Center down here at the Elsinore Outlet Mall. And you can learn what's going on with the Find Your Voice Center at the fyvcenter.org. That's our website, www.fyvcenter.org. And important to note, this March 25th, they have a teen-only workshop where your teen can create a 3-hour radio program that we broadcast on our very own Lake Elsinore radio station. So if you've got a teen that are interested in radio, podcasting, make sure that they sign up for the Saturday, March 25th teen-only workshop. Get more information at the fyvcenter.org. And now it's time for our show. Our newsmaker this week is Ruth Atkins and Jeanie Corral from the Lake Elsinore Historical Society. Now, as you know, the city is over 125 years old. Most people have not been living here that long, so we want to know what's been going on for 125 years since the city's been incorporated. And to find out, we are going to talk to Ruth Atkins and Jeanie Corral. We'll start off with Ruth. Ruth, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And Jeanie, thank you for joining us today.
Welcome.
So Ruth, you're the president of the Lake Elsinore Historical Society. Can you share with us what chain of events caused you to be the president, and why do we even have a Lake Elsinore Historical Society?
Well, the society was started by a lady by the name of Madonna Morin, better known as Donna. And Donna felt that Lake Elsinore, with all of its history, needed to have a historical society. And she talked with Tony Tobin, who was a man in Temecula, and he said, if you want a historical society, start it. And with that, why, she got some of her friends together, and in 1995 they started working on the incorporation and creation of the Lake Elsinore Historical Society. And so we have been in operation just about 20 years. Donna was president up until about 2004, and then health caused her to back out. And but how did I get involved in Historical Society? We had moved here in 1994, and we're happy with our new home. And 2.5 years later, my husband passed away, and I needed something to do, because I don't fit a rocking chair very well. And so I made some inquiries and was connected with Donna Morin. And when she saw me, I became immediately the secretary. I hadn't even, I barely paid my dues. And I was secretary. So a couple of years later, our treasurer, Imogen Llewellyn, decided she could not continue, and so they combined the secretary and treasurer, and I continued as secretary treasurer into 2007. At that point, then I became president and have been president ever since. And we have grown and moved around to a few places. And our first place was the Chamber of Commerce. What is now the office was their conference room. And then from there, we closed that in March of 1998, and Donna has had a very good gift of talking people into doing things for her. And so she convinced Jerry and Nadine Harmatz, who had a storefront building at 106 South Main Street, and they agreed to let us put our museum there. And we had it there until July of 2012. And at that point, Jerry sold the building, and so we had, in the meantime, we had leased the basement of the Cultural Center, and it was, when I saw it the first time, it was full of dusty, dirty church pews that had been in the on the first floor of the church. And so that we saw that. And well, Donna said, "Oh, we'll just store a little bit of stuff here." And then the next thing you know, gee, we could use this space. And at that point, we had been given 2 houses of furniture from one of the developers. And so we took that furniture down there and had a furniture sale.
Oh.
And then eventually they gave us the whole basement as the research library. And then when Jerry sold the 106 South Main Street, why then we combined everything. And so we've had our museum and research library all in the basement of the Cultural Center. And to get into the museum, you have to go to the Heald Avenue entrance on the side, because if you go to the front door and there's not a city meeting going on, the door is locked and people are very confused about that.
So you go around the side.
Yes, yes.
And so in addition to being a historical research center, is it also a visitor center where people can see what you have?
Oh, yes, we have lots of artifacts from the over 125 years of Elsinore history, and the fee is terribly expensive. It's called free.
Oh, my.
And so everybody is welcome to come and see the history of the city. And right now we have a display of the time capsule that the city unearthed in December of things that had been buried in 1991. So we have a display for the city, and that's kind of interesting to see.
Now it sounds like this. I'll be down there the next time I can. Next time it's open, is it like the Smithsonian where you have a bunch of different exhibits, or do you rotate the exhibits so every time people go they might see something different?
Well, they may not see something different every time, but we do try to bring in new things all the time, and we just never know what is going to pop into our hands, and it's very interesting.
Oh, well, great. And how are you financed?
We are financed by member dues and donations. We are a 501c3 corporation, nonprofit corporation, and so we don't have a lot of money, but we are solvent, and we're always looking for donations and assistance.
Great. And what are the plans that you have for 2017 and beyond? Anything that we need to know about?
I think we are not ready to release those as yet.
Okay, great. Well, one thing that we do like to hear about is great stories about Lake Elsinore. And we were talking on the phone the other day, and one of the most popular stories is about Aimee's Castle,
Yes.
right? So what for people who are just brand new to town or they haven't heard the story of Aimee's Castle, why don't you tell us what we need to know?
Okay. Aimee Simple McPherson was born in Canada, I think in 1894. Her mother was a member of the Salvation Army, and Aimee was dedicated to God before she was even born. But Aimee wasn't too excited about the Salvation Army, and she was kind of a roustabout in her young years, and she met her husband, and he was an evangelist, and long story short, they got married. They went to China to do some evangelism there. He got sick in China and died in China, and is buried in China, and they have a daughter and a son, and who were born, and so she came back here, and she and her mother got together, and they went around the countryside preaching. In any place that she could find a chair on a street corner, she got up on her chair and started preaching the Word of God. And she traveled across the whole United States, and then I think it was in the late 1819 that she and her mother started building the Angelus Temple, which is in the I think it's the Glen Echo Park area of L.A., and it will house, I think, something like 2,000 people.
Wow. And
she filled that every Sunday night with programs, and people were there to hear about God. And when she took the offering, she says, "I don't want to hear any noise. All I want is paper money."
Not the tinkle of the coin, the rustle of the paper.
Right,
There we go.
thank you. The rustle of the paper. And that church is still in operation today. It is owned by the Foursquare Gospel Church, and Aimee is considered the founder of the Foursquare Gospel Church.
Wow.
And today the church is known as The Rock.
and there is several blocks of rock buildings in Anaheim on East Orangethorpe, east of Lemon Street in Fullerton. I'm not sure if it's Fullerton or Anaheim, but at any rate, this church is very active. When backing up to when Aimee's Castle was, when it was occupied by a variety of people. The longest person living there was Violet McFarland, and Violet purchased it in 1961, and she died in 2001. And then the state sold her house at that point, and the family moved in. They were there for 3 years, and then he was transferred. So then it went into the hands of a local real estate. And oh, was it interesting to see all of the local people who were interested in buying that house. And they were just about, had decided who was going to get the house. And the church found out about it. They came in and offered $1 million cash for that house. They did a major renovation and restored it back to what it was when Aimee lived there. And in the little breakfast room, there was a chandelier, and the plaster around that was broken, but there was just a little bit of that design that had been painted on the ceiling. And so we have a local muralist by the name of Robin Goldman who took that little sample and recreated that mural on the ceiling around the chandelier in the breakfast room. And you could never tell that it was the original artwork. And so after the restoration was finished, they brought in a couple who were members and had been members of the church for a long time. From, I believe they're from Virginia, and they were here for 4 or 5 years, and they came to the Historical Society and said, would you like to do tours? And so we did tours and had lots of fun with tours, and so we would like to continue that. But when after the caretakers left, one of the board of directors on the corporate side of the church decided that Aimee's Castle was a big drag on the bottom line, and so he convinced the board of directors to sell it, and they ended up selling it to the Anaheim Rock, and then they didn't know quite what to do with it, and so they established a little congregation here in Lake Elsinore, and so they came and took over the castle, and still they didn't know what to do with it, and they put it up for sale, and it is now owned by a private party who happens to be a minister who wants to, she's just fascinated by Aimee and her life.
And are they going to be doing tours at all, or is it just going to remain private?
They're in the process of doing their restoration, and she sent me a note and said that when that's done, why she'll invite us to come over.
Oh, do they expect that to be this year or next?
They were not saying when.
Well, that sounds now. So there's all kinds of stories like Aimee's Castle around Lake Elsinore. Now, you brought a book? Is that a book of stories for Lake Elsinore?
It is the postcard history book of Lake Elsinore, and this is a book that published by the Historical Society, and we hope that it is correct, because there are some other books that have been published that were not correct. Beautiful pictures, captions not so beautiful. And so this book has a lot of interesting pictures in it of the history of Lake Elsinore.
Great. Well, we do have with us Jeanie Corral. Can you tell us, how did you meet Jeanie Corral, and how does she fit into the history of Lake Elsinore?
Oh, Jeanie Corral is the best historian in Lake Elsinore. That we've lost a couple of them,
yes,
and but Jeanie is my go-to person now, and I don't remember the first time we met.
I can't tell you either.
But we have, we have a question, and she has, she'll be looking for something, and we click. So.
Well, good. Well, why don't you hand the microphone to Jeanie? Now, Jeanie, is there any details about Aimee's castle that Ruth left out that you want to fill in?
I can do a few. The castle was built in the 1920s for a then cost in real money of more than $125,000.
Wow.
There was real gold that was put in the castle. The one area of the ceiling looked like night because the lights were recessed like stars. So when you turned everything on, you were back in like a Moorish castle.
Wow.
Aimee came out here frequently when she had the opportunity. In fact, one of the running jokes in the community that I was aware of when she disappeared was that she had walked across Lake Elsinore and just disappeared into thin air. The truth was she had left Lake Elsinore and gone to Mexico. And when she came back, I believe she was married briefly to a man by the name of Sutton?
Yes.
David Sutton.
David Sutton.
And so it made front page news of the leader press back then. There were many people who were offended by conspicuous consumption in their view, and it probably was because it is a castle. If you've never gone to see it, and if you get an opportunity, go. It was an incredible residence for one person to have, and she attributed it to God's goodness for her ministry. And I think she was arrested one time in town for speeding. I don't know what the speed limit was she broke, but she wrote a letter that was published, again, in the leader press, praising the police chief for not being afraid of a personage of her well-renowned status, and she paid the fine, whatever it was. Because back in the day when she was here, that was the same time when people like Clark Gable came here, Andy Devine came here. They fished and they hunted, and this was the early hangout for many of the stars before Palm Springs became the go-to place. So she was known to the community, not only for her fiery sermons, but for her fiery colored hair. And she always had on one of those long capes, and she was just her own woman.
That sounds awesome. So whatever became of her, I mean, I assume she's passed away.
Yes, she died. And there's still some controversy as to her death, as to what the cause of it was, because sometimes things are written in papers that aren't always accurate, and sometimes they're written with kindness because you care about the person, and they're still not accurate. So I think I'll leave it at that.
I might say that Aimee, in her during the Depression, she had done so many favors to our people over the years, and when the homeless and the people in need didn't have food, didn't have any place to live, it is written that Aimee did more for the people who were in need than the government did.
Wow.
And so she really had a great reputation for being very generous to those who needed help.
Well, that's awesome. Well, this is Dan Baldwin, and our newsmaker interview this week has been with Jeanie Corral and Ruth Atkins of the Lake Elsinore Historical Society, Lake Elsinore Historical Society. What are the hours that the museum is open?
The museum is open on Wednesdays from 11 to 3, and Saturdays from 11 to 3, and Sundays from 1 to 4. And we love to give tours to the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and special groups. And we will arrange those tours at a time when the museum is not open to the public, so that your group can come and have the run of the museum, and each tour takes about an hour.
Okay.
And that too is free.
And I think you have a website and a Facebook page so people can learn more about it online or contact you to make a reservation?
I don't have the address for the Facebook page, but our website is www.LakeElsinorHistoricalSociety.org, and there's a list of things that you can check there, and you can contact us through that site.
Great. Ruth Atkins Jeanie Corral, thank you very much for visiting with us, telling us about the Lake Elsinore Historical Society, and inviting everyone to come by. So if you care about history, if you care about Lake Elsinore, come learn what happened in the 125 years before you got here at the Lake Elsinore Historical Society. Thanks a lot, ladies.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
That was neat.